Welcome back. The panel is here. NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ryan Nobles, Helene Cooper, Pentagon correspondent for the New York Times, former Democratic Congresswoman Stephanie Murphy of Florida, and former Republican Congressman Carlos Curbelo, also of Florida. Thanks to all of you for being here. Ryan, I want to start with you and these tough poll numbers for President Biden showing former President Trump beating him for the very first time in our poll. You've been talking to folks inside Biden world. What are they telling you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the campaign knows that this is an issue for them and it's something that they have to deal with. But they're hoping that by this time next year, actually a little earlier than this time next year, that voters understand that it's a binary choice. It's either going to be Donald Trump or Joe Biden or some other Republican, and that even though they may not be specifically happy with the way the president has handled this situation, that they're not going to want to hand the White House to Donald Trump. And that means, though, that they've got to get a lot of work done between now and then. And they're aware of it. They're reaching out to these constituencies and explaining to them how the president is trying to balance the issues of these innocent Palestinians along with the right for Israel to defend itself. But part of it is they've got to get something done. And we have some new reporting this morning with our colleague Julie Sirkin about finding aid for Israel in the Congress, which has been so difficult right now. And what we're being told by congressional leaders is that they really believe they've got to get a package done between Thanksgiving and Christmas, because if this extends into the new year and we're up against a funding deadline, it's going to be that much more difficult to get it all done.
And that is a tight timeline. And Helene, you talk about getting something done. It would be significant if there was, in fact, a deal to release the hostages, because part of what this poll shows is that President Biden's getting low marks for his handling of foreign policy, for his handling of this war, particularly among younger voters. They're just abandoning him on this issue.
They really are. He's in danger of not losing his own party over this, but he's really seen his support go down, as your polls showed, among young Democrats who are very angry of his full embrace, I would say, of a right-wing Israeli government, the right-wing Israeli government of Benjamin Netanyahu. And I think that's where this hostage deal could actually help President Biden a little, because this hostage deal is significant for the families of the hostages, of course, but it's also significant in that this would be the first de-escalatory step we've seen since October 7th. This is going to be the first time that the two sides are starting to step back away from the escalation that we've had. And if it brings with it a 5-day humanitarian pause, people are hoping, people within the U.S. government are hoping, you don't know, maybe you could extend that pause, are hoping that this would at least for 5 days be a cessation of the bombing campaigns that you're seeing and this spiraling of the civilian death toll, which is what is hurting President Biden, I think, in the polls.
It is. It would be so significant. And if you look at, Stephanie, this word cloud that we have from our poll, it's so fascinating. You see foreign policy mentioned at the top, poor economic status, backed out of student loan bill, which is, of course, the Supreme Court blocked the president's actions on student loan, disagree with funding for Israel and Gaza, what Ryan was just talking about.
Yeah, you know, the problem for President Biden is that these are issues that are a problem for him, not just with Democrats, but also with Republicans and independents. For example, backed out of student loan. When he was unable to deliver on the promise to cancel loans, he disappointed Democrats, but then he also upset people who are non-college educated, who felt like he was trying to take their taxpayer dollars and pay for somebody else's college education. And he has struggled with the economy across the board. I think Bidenomics isn't being bought by the American people.
One of the top issues. There's no doubt about that. A lot of strategists want him to shift his messaging there. Carlos, when you look at the Republican field, Nikki Haley has real momentum here, but does she have enough time to catch up? We're about 2 months till Iowa.
Well, Kristen, something the NBC News poll reveals is that both these frontrunners, Trump and Biden, are very weak. They both have major liabilities. So this race for second place in the Republican Party is important. And someone like Nikki Haley, if she had the opportunity to face off one-on-one with Donald Trump early in the primary season, you could see a path for her. So some Republicans are increasingly excited about Haley. And again, I think it's important not to dismiss this race for second place, because who knows what's going to happen to both these frontrunners.
Yeah, it's a really great point. I want to talk to you all about something I talked to my guests about, which is this rise in anti-Semitic and, frankly, hate that we are seeing across the board online, in addition to the Elon Musk post that we talked about. we saw this stunning thing, this letter by Osama bin Laden justifying the 9/11 attacks. Helene, it's hard to even talk about. The letter's filled with anti-Semitic hate in it. Is this a national security threat?
I don't know that it's such a good question, and that letter made me crazy. A friend of mine sent me the TikTok video, and it's not the letter. We've all seen the letter. The letter came out back in 2002, I think, right after the 9/11 bombings, when Osama bin Laden released this, and we read it in the time. And all of a sudden, it resurfaces 20 years later, and you have these TikTok users who are tweeting and going and posting this letter and saying, "Oh, we've now realized that everything we've learned, we thought we knew about America, is wrong," because suddenly what is this the first time they're just reading somebody criticizing American policy? They're not used to that.
Well, and I'll say, social media is where we see these things, so I think we react and we want to blame social media, but this is something that exists in our society. There's a truth crisis in our society. There's probably an education failure in our society, and young people are disenfranchised in our society, which is probably why they're acting out. And you can kind of understand them. If you're 20, 25 years old, and you're asked to make a choice between Joe Biden and Donald Trump in terms of who's going to lead you, you can understand why some of these young people are frustrated with our democracy.
And why a lot of them may just sit out, right? And I think that's among the many concerns that are facing the Biden White House and the Biden campaign right now. It's not so much that they're worried that their supporters are going to go support Donald Trump or even Nikki Haley. They're more worried that they're just going to stay home, and they can't afford that.
Stephanie, we just have a few seconds.
Yeah, it's not a coincidence that young people who consume so much social media are also having these conversations in public. And I think the big concern here is, are they debating Americans to Americans on social media, or are there outside influences stoking division in America?
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app, or follow us on social media.